Covered in wounds, this woman has been struggling in the forest for an entire day and night. Her foot is pierced by a metal spike, and there is barely a patch of uninjured skin left on her body. Yet, the ones responsible for her and her boyfriend's tragic plight are not cold-blooded psychopathic butchers, but a group of reckless, arrogant teenagers. This is a film devoid of justice, where the innocent die brutally and the abusers walk away scot-free, leaving viewers with nothing but a bone-chilling dread and a profound sense of helplessness. Now, let us venture together into this forest steeped in bloodshed and cruelty. A woman is sunbathing by the lake when a group of delinquent youths begins leering at her from a distance. Realizing his girlfriend is being harassed, Steve immediately steps out of the water to confront them. As he approaches, however, he realizes they are just a group of adolescents. Steve politely advises them that their behavior is disrespectful, but the teenagers respond with sheer hostility and arrogance.
Come on, guys, don't be dicks. This is a big beach. There's room for all of us.
Who are you calling a dick? And what you looking at? Are you looking at my tits? Jog on.
Wishing to avoid a conflict, Steve lets it go. He has no idea that this brief moment of tolerance and restraint will ultimately drag him and his girlfriend into an inescapable living hell. Just as Steve returns to his girlfriend, the group walks directly toward them. As they pass by the campsite, their faces are filled with contempt and provocation. Steve's anger begins to flare, but his girlfriend, eager to keep the peace, quickly calms him down, reminding him that it is pointless to pick a fight with children. They both believe the ordeal is over, but they are entirely unaware that the youth's retaliation has only just begun. The teens do not leave. Instead, they lurk in the shadows, closely watching the couple's every move. The next morning, as Jenny steps out of the tent, she is shocked to find their food covered in ants and completely ruined. With no other choice, they decide to drive into town to replenish their supplies. However, as soon as they start the car, Steve realizes that one of the tires has been slashed. Knowing full well who is responsible, Steve has no choice but to put on the spare tire. After buying what they need, they return to the lakeside, determined to continue their romantic getaway. Yet they remain oblivious to the malicious eyes watching them from the depths of the forest. After enjoying a swim in the lake, they return to the shore only to discover to their horror that their wallets are gone. To make matters worse, along with the cash, the wallet also contained Steve's car keys. A deep sense of dread washes over them. They rush back to where they parked, but they are already too late. As they search frantically, their own car suddenly speeds out of the woods toward them. Fortunately, Steve had quick reflexes. Otherwise, they both would have met with disaster on the spot. At the wheel is Brett, the ringleader of the group. Watching Brett speed off with a smug grin, Steve is consumed with fury and frustration. Left stranded, the couple has no choice but to trek through the dense forest on foot. After walking from morning until dusk, they cross paths with the teenagers once again, deep in the woods. Suppressing his rage, Steve approaches them to negotiate calmly, demanding the return of his car and personal belongings. But the teens show no remorse. One of them is even wearing Steve's sunglasses, looking insolent and defiant. Their dog also barked and snarled incessantly, mirroring their aggressive hostility. These relentless provocations push Steve past his breaking point. He steps forward, determined to teach the arrogant youths a lesson. To his shock, the lawless teens draw a knife and lunge at him. Fortunately, Steve reacts quickly, grabbing the blade with his bare hands to deflect a potentially fatal blow. The physical confrontation escalates rapidly into utter chaos. In the struggle, the dog is accidentally stabbed and killed.
Buddy, you stole my dog.
It was an accident. Look, give me the car keys. I'll drive her to the vet.
Staring at his lifeless dog, Brett freezes, his shock quickly turning into a murderous rage. Steve realizes that if they stay any longer, they will not make it out alive. Sensing the danger, Jenny grabs the car keys dropped on the ground, pulls Steve toward the car, and they attempt to flee. But navigating the dark, muddy, and rugged forest trails proves difficult for the panicked couple, and disaster strikes. Their car gets hopelessly stuck in a deep mud pit. The teenagers quickly catch up and begin pelting the car with rocks. They close in, slowly surrounding the trapped vehicle. In a desperate bid for survival, Steve rolls up the windows and guns the engine. The car breaks free from the mud, but in the pitch-black darkness, Steve loses control and crashes violently into a tree. The heavy impact leaves Steve pinned inside the wreckage by thick branches, unable to move. Sensing the urgency, Steve urges Jenny to leave him behind and run to find help. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Jenny slips out of the car and runs into the darkness. Moments after Jenny flees, the teenagers catch up to the car. Using the cover of night, she conceals herself in the dense undergrowth. While Jenny temporarily manages to hide, The trapped Steve is about to face an absolute nightmare. The true horror is only beginning. As she navigates through the forest, a sight ahead sends a shiver down her spine, freezing her with sheer terror. Bound and covered in blood, the dying man before her is indeed her boyfriend. Those holding and torturing him are not seasoned killers, but the hostile teenagers. Their ringleader, Brett, is particularly sadistic. To ensure everyone is complicit in the crime, Brett forces each member of the gang to stab Steve. Showing no mercy to Steve's desperate pleas, Brett remains entirely cold and unyielding.
You wanna front, you wanna act like the fucking big man. You step up now.
With a cold and remorseless expression, he orders Paige to film the brutal torture on her phone. Intimidated by Brett's volatility and dominance, the other teens dare not object. Forced to take the knife, Reese only dares to make a light scratch on Steve's arm. This half-hearted gesture infuriates Brett, who demands a real attack. Overwhelmed by fear of Brett, Reese relents and plunges the knife in. He immediately breaks down, running to the side to vomit, his body trembling uncontrollably. Mark, who has been watching silently with an indifferent expression, then pulls out a utility knife and plunges it into Steve's abdomen without hesitation. Under Brett's coercive pressure, Ricky also stabs Steve with a knife. Their collective actions escalate this bullying into an act of unspeakable cruelty. Hiding in the brush, Jenny witnesses the entire horrific scene. Watching her boyfriend endure this agonizing torture, Jenny's heart breaks, her body trembling with grief and horror. She pulls out her phone to call the police, but there is no signal in the deep woods. In an effort to help, Jenny attempts to connect to Steve's phone via Bluetooth. Sensing the Bluetooth pairing alert, Brett immediately realizes that Jenny must be hiding nearby. Before they can search for her, Jenny intentionally makes a noise to draw them away from Steve and toward herself. The teenagers know that what they have done amounts to attempted murder, and they will all face prison time if caught. Driven by panic, they mount their bikes and chase after Jenny. Once the gang is gone, Steve endures the excruciating pain and manages to break free from the wires binding his hands. Now free, he wastes no time, dragging his bleeding body toward the forest exit. Meanwhile, Jenny runs for her life through the thick brush. To slow down her pursuers, she sets a tripwire-like branch across the path. The teenagers crash, which only infuriates them further. Enraged, Brett orders them to abandon their bikes and pursue her on foot. Running blindly, Jenny stumbles upon an abandoned construction site. She spots a walkie-talkie inside a shed, but the door is securely locked with heavy chains. By then, Brett and his gang have already reached the perimeter of the site. Desperate, she sheds her jacket to throw them off and slips around the side of the building to hide. Reese slips behind the structure to close in on her. Fortunately, Jenny has already climbed onto the roof, narrowly escaping detection. Once the coast is clear, she climbs down and flees back into the forest. During her flight, she experiences a stroke of luck. She unexpectedly encounters the badly wounded Steve. Reunited in the face of despair, Jenny supports Steve as they continue their escape. They soon reach the lakeside and hide beneath a wooden cabin. Jenny pulls out her small first aid kit to dress Steve's wounds. However, footsteps approach once again as Brett's gang tracks them to the cabin. To avoid being spotted, Jenny and the failing Steve huddle quietly in the dark space beneath the cabin. Suffocating from severe blood loss, Steve's body begins to shake uncontrollably, his life slipping away. Finding no signs of life, the teenagers move on to search elsewhere. Once the danger passes, Jenny helps Steve crawl out from under the cabin. Steve is now on the brink of death. Despite his failing strength, Steve is still deeply concerned for Jenny's safety. He weakly whispers instructions to her. There are power lines nearby, and if she follows them, they will lead her out of the forest to an area with cell service so she can call for help. Tears streaming down her face, Jenny commits his words to memory. To hide Steve from the hunters, she covers him with a thick layer of leaves. She then sets off alone toward the power lines, carrying their sole hope of survival. Yet, the ordeal in this wilderness is far from over. Before she can break out of the woods, she steps directly onto a sharp metal spike. The agonizing pain sends her crashing to the ground, leaving her unable to run. Jenny struggles to pull the metal shard from her foot, knowing she is still surrounded by danger. Crawling to the top of a hill, she encounters Adam, the young boy she saw earlier. Believing Adam is innocent compared to the others, she begs him to lead her out of the forest. He nods cooperatively, but Jenny has no idea that beneath his innocent exterior lies a cruel heart. The boy leads her straight into an ambush set by the rest of the gang. As she tries to back away, she is knocked unconscious. When she wakes up, she is horrified to find herself bound to a wooden stake, unable to move. To her absolute heartbreak, Steve's lifeless body is tied to a stake right behind her. The liquid the teenagers have poured over them is not water, but gasoline. Brett forces a box of matches into the trembling hands of the young Adam, ordering him to set them on fire. Too terrified of Brett to resist, the boy tremblingly throws the lit match onto Steve's gasoline-soaked body. Instantly, flames erupt, engulfing Steve's body. Watching this horrific scene, Brett shows no remorse, but rather an eerie excitement. He thrives on the power of violence, demonstrating a chilling lack of humanity. Fortunately, the spreading fire begins to burn through the ropes binding Jenny. Seizing this brief window, she struggles with all her might and manages to break free. Enraged by her escape, Brett vents his anger by grabbing Adam. He screams into the forest, threatening to burn Adam alive if Jenny does not return. Jenny assumes it is an empty threat, but moments later, agonizing screams echo through the trees. The depravity of these teenagers knows no bounds. Stricken by the horror of yet another senseless killing, Jenny flees deeper into the woods without looking back. Little does she know, their tragic fate was sealed the moment they set foot in this forest. During her frantic flight, Jenny discovers a map of the forest. Realizing it is her only hope of escaping this purgatory, she smashes the glass case to take it, leaving a quick distress note behind. As she studies the map, the sound of approaching footsteps echoes nearby. Cornered, Jenny is forced to climb into a foul, rancid dumpster. Holding her breath in the cramped space, she barely manages to avoid detection. Only after the footsteps fade does she crawl out of the dumpster. She is now covered in filth and thoroughly exhausted. Tearing a piece of fabric from her clothes, she wrapped it tightly around a sharp shard of glass to use as her final weapon for self-defense. Yet, her ordeal is far from over. Just as she struggles to her feet, Cooper quietly sneaks up behind her. The fear and rage bottled up inside her suddenly erupt. Driven by pure survival instinct, she kills him. The shock of taking a life combined with her lingering terror completely breaks her. As night falls, the dark forest grows quiet. Jenny finally breaks out of the forest and spots a parked van. Believing she is finally safe, she hopes to find help. However, cruel fate strikes again. The driver of the van is actually the older brother of Ricky, one of her tormentors. When the driver steps out to look for his brother, Jenny slips into the driver's seat and speeds away. As she flees down the road, she spots Paige, one of the teenagers from the gang. Overwhelmed by survival instinct, Jenny grips the wheel and deliberately runs her down. Speeding out of the wilderness, she finally reaches the local town. Battered and bloody, she stumbles into a lively backyard party. The partygoers look at the traumatized Jenny with shock and concern. None of them understand the sheer horror she has just survived. They gently help her inside to rest on a sofa. For a fleeting moment, she believes she is finally safe, but reality is relentlessly cruel. Looking around the room, Jenny's blood runs cold. Hanging prominently on the living room wall is a photo of Brett. After all her struggles, she has unwittingly run straight into the home of her chief tormentor. Terror grips Jenny once again. She realizes she has not escaped the nightmare. She has walked right into its heart. Panicking, she begs the hosts to call an ambulance before locking herself inside the bathroom. In desperation, she finds a razor blade and holds it tightly, her final line of defense. After a tense silence, heavy pounding and angry shouting erupt from the other side of the door. Jenny knows her identity has been discovered. The door is violently forced open. Jenny tries desperately to plead her case, but her words fall on deaf ears. The parents, fiercely protective of their children, refuse to listen. Brett has already spun a web of lies, painting Jenny and Steve. This defensive act completely enrages the family. He accuses her of murdering her boyfriend and brutally attacking the local kids. Cornered and terrified, Jenny accidentally slashes Brett's father with the razor in the struggle. This defensive act completely enrages the family. Driven by a desire to avenge their wronged children, the adults decide to take matters into their own hands. Ultimately, Jenny does not die at the hands of the teenagers in the woods, but at the hands of their blindly protective parents. Brett, the architect of this entire tragedy, emerges completely unscathed. He stands calmly in front of his bedroom mirror, examining a tiny scratch on his face, showing not a shred of guilt. His heinous deeds remain unexposed, and his crimes unpunished. Justice never arrives, and the belief that good conquers evil is completely shattered in this bleak reality. The film hints from the very beginning that the children's twisted psychology is a direct product of their dysfunctional homes. Violent, abusive fathers and blindly defensive mothers are the true root causes of this horror. Released in 2008, the British thriller Eden Lake strips away all illusions to expose the darkest, rawest aspects of human nature. Through the unchecked cruelty of these youths, the film shatters the comforting illusion of childhood innocence.